Welcome everybody to ProductCamp. Let's have a little round of applause. Woo! It is great to be here. My name is Greg Katikia, and I'm going to do a little bit of talking before we have our keynote here this morning. I'll do a lot of talking. Hopefully you do a lot of listening. If you finish up before I do at this time in the morning, just let Mark or somebody else know. When I came up with this idea of bringing ProductCamp here to the city of Pittsburgh, I had no idea that we would have this type of enthusiastic reception. So thank you all. Give yourself a little round of applause. Thank you all for being here this morning. I usually start my classes by asking people to stand up and introduce themselves. So if we have a little time this morning, maybe we can do one by one. Well, that was the best dad joke I had this morning, right? I mean, we're doing all right. I do want to spend just a second here before we introduce Eric Boduch, thanking some of the people that have made this happen, and if you would join me in thanking them as well, because this has been a lot of work. This has been 6 months of all volunteer work by a number of people who they volunteered, and if they didn't, I voluntold them, and they were kind enough to join. But first of all, I want to thank our sponsors, starting out with our founding sponsors, Dick's Sporting Goods. So thank you very much, Dick's. If there's representatives here from Dick's. By the way, for many of you who are here not only to seek knowledge and gain and exchange and network, but also are seeking employment or possible employment, many of these companies, there will be a little breakout room that I can tell you about. There'll be several of them where they'll be meeting and happy to meet with you one-on-one or in groups or whatever, and they'd be very interested in talking to you about your career and how their company can help you. Also, we have our gold sponsors, Citrus Byte, Logi Analytics, User Voice, Philips, and Pendo. And Eric's from Pendo here this morning, so thank you very much. Many of these companies involved in analytics and product management and all types of innovation, because this is not only about product development and product management, but also innovation. Our silver sponsors, including Randy Rossi of Bally Design, Pragmatic Marketing, Split, and OpenArc. We get a little quick round of applause for them, please. And finally, our bronze sponsors, including my friends at the PDMA Pittsburgh, who have a booth out here, our friends at Sirius Decisions, the leading analysts for product management, niche, under 10, and Steve Johnson, who's going to speak later on today, 280 Group, a leader in product management thought, and TrueFit, a local successful software development organization. So thank you all for your bronze sponsors. We have one more round of applause for them. A real big thank you to my employer, Carnegie Mellon University, and several schools, including the School of Computer Science, the Integrated Innovation Institute, and the Tepper School of Business, all together, joining together to help bring this to you today. And this beautiful facility, which had its grand opening a couple weeks ago. It's only been open for a couple months. So as you can see, it is quite the facility. Don't get lost walking around for the rooms here today as well. And tonight, thanks to our friends at Google and Bakery Square, it's going to be a great pleasure to have an after party there. So if you're sticking around for the day, make sure you get a wristband. If you can't use it and you've got a wristband, it is limited tonight. So please give me your wristband back sometime during the day. I'd be happy to allocate it to someone that can go. Okay, I'd appreciate your help with that. Okay, so I'm going to switch it over to Eric Boduch, who is the founder and CEO of Chief Evangelist Officer of Pendo. If you don't know Pendo, it is a truly great company. It is in the product management business. I'll do a little bit of his background. He formerly served as the chief executive officer of a local company here called Smash. He was the vice president of marketing at Vitria, and earlier in his career, he co-founded a local startup that had national and global impact called Cerebellum, which was a Carnegie Mellon University spin-out as well. Eric today is going to talk about the evolution of the role of product management. So with that, Eric, thank you so much. This.
I think I need to
See that?
Thank you, Greg. Sound okay? Yeah, perfect back there? Sweet. Okay, so as Greg talked about, I'm going to talk about the role of product management. And first I'll kick off just a little bit of a background on me and Pendo, the company. So first a little bit of my background, which I normally don't go through, but since I'm here at my alma mater, I thought I'd say that. So Carnegie Mellon, electrical and computer engineering back in a while ago, I don't really want to say. And Pendo, the interesting thing about Pendo, started by two Carnegie Mellon guys. We brought in another two co-founders, one from NC State and one from Georgia Tech, but two CMU guys, both ECE guys, kicked off Pendo. We're now 250 people, offices in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is our headquarters. San Francisco, we employ about 30 now. We have an office outside Israel and in New York City. It's really cool. We had a couple of years, or maybe, about 18 months into the company, we had this big celebration. We had tracked 1 billion events. It was like this cool thing. We printed T-shirts. We had the little Dr. Evil, I think it was, right? 1 billion events. And now we're up to the point where we're doing 50 billion events a month. So it's kind of crazy. In aggregate, it took us like 18 months to get there. So Pendo's been a rocket ship, really quick ride. I mean, the company is yet to be 5 years old. I think we'll turn 5 officially in October. I think we said 15th or so is our birthday. So not quite 5 yet. It's been a very exciting ride for us. And we wouldn't be there without some great companies that we've been able to work with, from the old school companies in technology like Cisco and Citrix to a lot of the new school leaders like Atlassian and Zendesk. So give you a little background for those of you who don't know Pendo. We power the product cloud. So we help product managers. We were built from the ground up for product managers. We help product managers gather feedback, capture usage analytics, and guide their users to a better experience. So I like to talk about it as understanding your users as a PM and then guiding them. So that's how I like to summarize kind of the overview of Pendo. We do have a booth. I invite you to stop by, learn a little bit more about Pendo. But with that, I'll stop the Pendo pitch and get into the product management story. So it's interesting. I mean, I look really young. I'm sure you all are thinking, but but I am an old guy, not quite as old as Greg, but still an old guy. So I've definitely seen the winter of product management, and even a few years ago it was that way. When you ask people what tools they were using in product management, what their stack looked like, they're like, oh yeah, Word, Excel, maybe Microsoft Project, right? There was no tool set around for product management. When you talk to them about education, some of them maybe, got taught by Steve Johnson when he was at Pragmatic before he started Under 10, but there wasn't a lot of education. There was consultancies, some training classes. The idea of having a degree in product management was like crazy, right? It was very different than it is now. And product managers too were often, there was a joke going around, if you had a good salespeople everyone liked that could talk well and maybe write a little bit, but couldn't sell, well, maybe he fit in product management. Or we had an engineer that didn't really write great code, but everyone liked him and he understood the product a little bit and he could talk to customers. And there was like, well, maybe we can put him in product management, right? So it was definitely what I would say the winter of product management. But what we see now is things are definitely changing. We did this study with Product Collective where we asked people in and around product management what they thought of the space, right? And now all of a sudden they have a product stack. They're using tools like User Voice or Split or Pendo, right? They have real products that are built by them, right? Pendo was started by product managers to make product managers' lives better. So we really see this world where product managers are now starting to get the tools. And now the education's out there, right? Carnegie Mellon, amazingly, I think the first program in the country has a master's in product management. That's astounding. It's invigorating for those who have been in this space for quite a while now. So I'm really pumped about how things are changing. We got analysts like SiriusDecision is here today, right? If you looked back 10 years ago, there was no one at all who covered product management from an analyst perspective. Now we have Jeff Lash and Sirius, and Gartner's starting to grow that group. We're starting to see more and more people, providing best practices and information to product management professionals, to leaders, and to the companies out there. Like I'm sure we have the PNC Banks, the Highmarks, people from there today. Those types of people are looking at how do I incorporate product management best practices into what is traditionally, say, a CIO-driven IT shop, right? So things are definitely changing. And I like to point out this is one area in particular where things have changed, right? I've been doing this a while. I remember consulting back maybe 15 years ago, talking with one of the one of the biggest tech companies, and I was talking about one of their software products, and he was telling me how they made decisions, and it really came down to, after a couple drinks, he was like, you know, what it really comes down to is I bet $50 million on the gut instinct of my product manager, right? And that's not the way things are today. You look at today, and we'll see 75% of software providers are going to rely on analytics of some kind to drive their product direction. So the world is getting better. The world is changing. You can see, I don't know how many of you have ever seen the image on the left, but that really this is an actual user interface. I forget where the screenshot is from. So things have changed a lot as far as UX, UI, and expectations, right? It's no longer acceptable to have this horrible user experience at company applications or when you're at your job. It's moved to an environment because of things like the iPhone, because of the consumerization of the enterprise, to you're getting experiences at work that feel more like Airbnb or Uber, right? So the UX UI world has changed, and I think that's great for product managers. At the same time I say this, things could be better still, right? I look at it and I say, you know, we're entering kind of the spring of product management, but there's things we need to improve as product managers. One thing I look at, this came from a study we did with Product Collective, an industry firm based in Cleveland, of all places. Go Steelers. But one of the things that came up in our work with them is that people focused more on what their competitors were doing as opposed to what their customers wanted or the feedback they're getting from their customers. So this is an area where we're often driven by fear or competition, where we really should be driven by vision and customers. And then also out of this, we looked at alignment between product management and different parts of the organization. And one would think that the big areas of alignment would be between product and engineering more than anything else. Maybe product marketing would be up there ahead of engineering. What we found in actually talking with product managers is that they weren't very well aligned with engineers. And they thought they had poor influence and poor rapport with the engineering organizations. So that's definitely an area where things need to change. Another area is looking at reporting relationships. You know, it used to be that product management, product management would be hidden, maybe in an engineering group, maybe in a marketing group, and that's still the way today a little bit. You know, we see the majority of product managers out there, or heads of product management, are reporting into marketing. There's not a lot of chief product officers still out there. It's like 7% or so, I believe. Yeah, 7%. In some cases, they're at a business line, which I think is a good start, but really we need to elevate this so that they're at the board table. And then we looked at happiness too, like how happy are product managers? And we used NPS as a gauge. I thought it was a good use of NPS, maybe not perfect. And the average NPS for product managers was 20. So they're generally satisfied, maybe not super gung-ho, super excited, but generally satisfied. We did find that people who owned like the engineering UX functions, the market research functions had the highest NPS. I think you'll see, and it maybe makes sense, that in the cases where product managers own service and support, their NPS was the lowest, and I think that's self-explanatory to some extent. And how does that compare? Well, Apple employees, I think, average around a 45 NPS, right? So they're generally happier. McDonald's, I think, was a 0, which, sorry, for those who have worked at McDonald's in the past. Good place to first get a job. And I think, what was it? Coca-Cola employees are like 25. So we have a good spot to go. We're doing okay there, but not doing as well as we could. So, but all in all, I would say things are good for product management, good for the product management profession. What I'm starting to see out there, used to be I'd see tweets in the early days of Twitter or see emails or hear stories where like, oh, it doesn't matter how bad our product is because I can sell ice to Eskimos, or I have a sales and marketing team that's awesome. Now I'm starting to see some of the opposite stuff, which is both good and scary, right? You're starting to see people like Jason Lemkin say, oh, if your product's really good, if the product market fit's there, even if your sales and marketing's horrible, you're gonna sell lots of product, right? I don't know I entirely believe this. It's kind of swinging the pendulum in the other way, but it's much better as a product guy to see this than seeing, crappy products, we can sell them no matter what because we have a good sales and marketing team. So you see a lot of this shift start to take place. Puts pressure on us as PMs. which leads to this next thing, right? Because there's this new visibility, because we have the stack, because we're starting to get more visibility at higher levels in an organization, because there is education, because there's more best practices, the expectations for product managers have definitely gone through the roof. So it raises the bar for all of us. You know, we can't have product managers that are just like, we like the guy, he wasn't great at sales, he's gonna be in the product management space. We need to make sure our product managers are getting educated properly, whether they're working with Steve at under 10, whether they got you know, an MS from Carnegie Mellon. All of those things are now starting to become the expectation. That product management is turning more from an art into a craft. Maybe not yet a science, but turning from art into a craft. So one of the things Greg wanted me to talk about was a few things I think we can do better, right? So I kind of laid the landscape. I think we moved from the winter of product management into the spring. There's a lot of things that have changed for the positive. There's some, you know, things, some data points I think we can dig into to do things better. First, you know, one of the things I didn't dig into is that there's an opportunity to cast a much wider hiring net in product management. So I've had the pleasure, because of my position, to interview a lot of heads of product, leaders of product management, authors, consultants, and people like Greg. And what I found is that you don't need to have, if you're working in product management, you don't need to have a software engineering degree. I mean, I do, as it turns out, but it's not necessary, and I haven't written code since 6 months after school, at least not any code that should be published anywhere. I did build a little app with my daughter on the iPhone. I think it was kind of like Magic 8-Ball-y, you know. It's kind of fun. But as that aside, I've met some great people that have backgrounds outside of software that have become great product leaders. Like a guy by the name of Mike Profit has built 3 different product organizations at large companies, and he has a degree in evolutionary biology, right? I've talked to people that have come out of the psychology space and got into product management. And I think I would challenge the product leaders out there to look at hiring not just, you know, technical product managers from a technical space, but looking at what some liberal arts majors and other areas of sciences can bring into the product space. One of the things that I found most when I talk to product managers, as far as their characteristics, is the most powerful product leaders have really strong empathy, meaning they can really get in their customers' shoes. And that's often something you don't get out of the technical side of things. So a characteristic I would say that's extremely important is empathy. And if you look to broaden your team, I would definitely say look outside of just people with a strong technical degree. Second thing, and I joke about this, but it's, you know, pretty true. It doesn't have to be a beer. It could be a coffee. One person complained one time when I was quoted saying this, was like, we don't want to get them drunk. But the idea is not to get your engineers drunk, though that might help from time to time. But the idea is, you know, it would be great to foster that relationship more with the engineering group. I was saddened to see, as a past engineer and now product person, how misaligned product teams felt they were with engineering. So see how you can improve that in your organization. Whether that's more cross-functional meetings, whether that's coffees, whether that's going out and getting drunk together every once in a while. I think it's a great idea. Copycat mode. You know, one of the things that came out of the product collective information, as I highlighted, is a lot of people chasing competitors. I would say that, you know, good product leaders and good product managers should be thinking more about vision, more about their customers, and less about what their competition is doing. I know a lot of us, at least, you know, back in the day when we were funding companies in the dot-com era, it was like, oh, is Microsoft going to do that, or is Google going to do that? And there was a lot more on the venture side worried about competition. I've seen that change from the venture perspective, and I think it needs to change from a product manager's mindset, where people look at how I can lead, how I can create sustainable value, how I can have those aha and happy moments for my customers, as opposed to how I can catch up in some perceived area that competition has. We often found, I was talking with Dan Olson, who wrote Lean Product Playbook, about this, and he's like, when I have my clients that are chasing competitors, I often found that they're chasing competitive features that their customers actually don't want. Right? They're chasing mistakes that their competitors made in some cases, not the great things. So I would say, you know, it's important to acknowledge competitors. It's important to look at what they're doing, but I think you need to lead based upon your vision and the feedback you're getting from your customers, your prospects, in other parts of your organization. Fourth point, which might be less applicable to a lot of you people out there, but if there are CEOs out there, I would say give product a seat in the boardroom. It's very important that just like the marketing organization, the revenue organization, the financial organization, that product has a seat at the boardroom. They're the best people to bring the issues in and around product management to that level. And then finally, we talked about data and using data to drive product. We don't live in an age anymore where it's okay to bet $50 million on a gut instinct, right? Bring data into your product process. That can be quantitative data, things like usage analytics. That can be NPS data. That can be survey data. That can be interviews with customers. But as much as possible, bring data into your process. Now, I'll make this quick because we started a little late and I don't want to go too far over. But I also wanted to not just give kind of high level. I wanted to say, here's 3 things you can do today as a product manager out there that can improve your product. And because of the nature of it, I looked at more of the overall experience than particular things like, oh, you should run this process, or you should make sure you optimize or prioritize features in this way, because I felt like this would be more applicable to everybody. The first I'm going to touch on is this idea of happy path. And I use this from a perspective of trial users, but this could be just as well applied to things like expansion opportunities. So how do you find happy paths for users? And a lot of you out there, if you're running free trials, you have this issue of, okay, we get people in a free trial, and we hope they do the right things, and we hope they convert. And we try to have the best user experience. We try to, we'll give them calls, maybe we'll survey them afterwards, we'll send them emails. But what I would challenge you to do is re-look at how you're thinking about this process and start with data. I spend a lot of time talking with customers about best practices with this idea of modeling customers, right? So a great thing to do for trials, and can be, like I said, applied to expansion, is start modeling success. What does success look like for your trials? What does success look like for your expansion? And by success, I mean, who are those customers that converted their trial? Who are those customers that expanded? And what features do they actually use? And from that, you can start building this model. Like, we find that, if someone's going to buy after a 30-day free trial, they use features X, Y, and Z. Once you have that information, you can start modeling your trial process around it. You can do things like halfway through a trial, guide them to those features. Like, we see you are checking out our spelling software, but you haven't used spell check. This is how it works. You don't have to have a dictionary at your desk anymore. Let me walk you through how to use it. So think about things from a product perspective about modeling. Same thing in expansion. You can model the attributes of people that went from, say, version A of your software, which costs $500, to version B, which costs $5,000, right? What features do they use? And then start thinking about your experience with your version A customers. How do you push them to features or to use cases that they're gonna self-select to upgrade to this next version of the software? And as I go through these ideas, I want not just to give kind of the overview, but I want to prove that it actually did work. So I'm going to highlight some different people that I know. Like Citrix did this for trial conversions. They went and they figured out what was important to their users, and if they used those features, they were more likely to convert. And then they took in-app messaging and guides and pushed people to those features. So in their case, it was things like uploading files, adding users, sending a file, large files in particular. So by optimizing this process, by understanding what users really did who are going to convert, and then pushing all users of a trial towards that, they're able to push up trial conversions 11%, which is big money for them. One little caveat here, I think it's really interesting. A lot of people come into it and say, like, oh, I know exactly what my customers need to do in order to convert. And what we've seen from lots of different data across the industry is that it's not usually true. It is true from time to time, but it's not usually true. It's often that, it's just like that little bike path, right, where people have taken the grass and it's now all dead because that's the way they walk. Similar with software. Quite often people will find a different route to accomplishing their tasks than you think. Second big thing, want to talk about improving your product through improving your onboarding. A lot of people, don't have a good onboarding experience. And we live in a world of reoccurring revenue. We live in the world of SaaS. The more you can improve your onboarding experience, the less likely customers are to churn. In fact, studies show that the biggest indicator of churn is the happiness a customer or user has from the onboarding experience. So the happier they are with onboarding, the more likely they are to renew a year from now when their contract comes up. So no matter what you do after onboarding between that contract renewal, you can't affect things as much as you can during that onboarding experience. So one of the things you should think about to make onboarding better is to customize that experience. Think about it as like a user. And a lot of you out there probably have different types of users, right? So if I'm a user of your software as a product guy, I'm going to want a different experience than maybe an engineer using your software. So think about how you can customize that onboarding experience based upon who they are, whether a new account, an existing account, because those are very different, because there's not that institutional knowledge. Think about how things like what product they signed up for might or should affect their onboarding experience. And if you work in a seasonal industry like tax, think about how that affects onboarding experience too. So if you think about onboarding experience, I would say first, make sure you have a really succinct in-app onboarding experience in addition to what they might get from customer success. And then think about how you can customize that based upon data you have about the users. Here's an example, just like Citrix, this is a company called Harvest Exchange. They had two very distinct types of users, individual users and financial professionals. When they segmented their onboarding experience out into those two different ways and did education on those two different ways, they got a 70% growth rate in returning visitors. So huge impact by instead of doing a one-size-fits-all onboarding, splitting it into two different experiences based upon their different personas. And then finally, no one likes talking to support. So I would challenge all of you to think about looking at data and saying, what's driving people to support? What were they doing right before they called support? Like, what was this person trying to accomplish? And then seeing how you can fix that inside the application. I, as a user, don't want to have to call American. It would be great if, certain things just worked well, like their same-day flight change. Hint, hint. But as product managers, you can make that better. Maybe you can't immediately change the product. Maybe that sprints down the line, but you can do things like in-app guidance, like messaging, like little tool tips, where you can teach people about how they can better accomplish what they want to do. Here's an example of that. One of Pendo's customers, in fact, WebPT, used our data to look at what was driving people to support, and then they deployed tooltips, they deployed some walkthroughs on those items, and they were able to cut their support tickets down by 50%, which if you're a large company out there, one of the big companies in Pittsburgh, that's big money. And even if you're a small company, the resources you spend, helping customers solve their problems could be better applied to other areas. And then I would say, for the people out there that are UX experts, even the most intuitive UX, no matter how it is, needs help. And it's a great way, you looking at in-app messaging and guidance, looking at what you can do inside your application, things like, pop-ups for help, walkthroughs, links to your support center, your help guides, all of that stuff only makes your user experience better. So with that, I'm going to finish up right on time. A few resources. I mentioned this study. We did the State of Product Leadership along with the professionals from Cleveland at Product Collective. You can get a copy of it. It's slightly old now. There probably will be a new one in like 6 months. But you can get a copy at pendo.io/State of Product Leadership. And then finally, I've had the pleasure of interviewing a bunch. Oh, let me go back to that. There's a couple more people looking to take pictures. I'll just pause here for a minute. It's not the easiest URL to remember. We could make that a little easier. And then finally, I've had the pleasure of interviewing a bunch of leaders in product management. A lot of people that are in the room actually today. Jeff Lash was on my product podcast. Greg Katikia, our wonderful, if slightly older than me, host. And Steve Johnson, who's our closing keynote, was also on iTunes is bouncing. Was also on the podcast. So those of you who are interested, I've had the pleasure of interviewing people like Dan Olson, Nir Eyal, who wrote Hooked, and some wonderful people. Ryan Singer will be out soon from Basecamp. So I invite you to check it out and tell me what you think. On Twitter, I'm Boduch. I'm Eric, E-R-I-C, at pendo.io. I'm happy to answer any questions today when you see me or via email. So thank you.